Hello and welcome back to the Bullfrog Pod. Today we are talking about one thing and one thing only, Rory Strat. We're going to cover a lot in this and follow it up with an episode about his other notable guitars and gear. So if you're a guitar geek, then you're in for a great 2 episodes. I've kept the history of the guitar succinct, but a longer, more detailed version will be posted on our Substack and will be emailed out to the mailing list. As always, all the links to information will be included in the description, and you can go and do your own reading in your own time. The whole way throughout this recording, the smoke alarm was beeping, so if you just heard it a minute ago, if you hear it, the beeping in the background throughout this episode, then that's what that is. But that makes for a nice kind of background noise anyway, and there's the lovely sound of rain. I don't know if the mics are picking that up, but it's loud, it's rainy, there's a smoke alarm going on, so yeah, it's ambient, and we'll just get stuck into it. Rory was 15 when he first laid hands on the guitar that would define his career. When people think about Rory Gallagher, they picture a checked shirt wizard with a battered, worn-down looking guitar, a Fender Stratocaster. Rory had convinced his mum that he needed an electric guitar, and in 1963 she took him to Crawley's Music in Cork. Rory held the Strat in his hands and knew it was the guitar. The asking price was £100, which at the time was a lot of money. His mother and Michael Crawley tried to persuade him to buy a more affordable Hagstrom guitar, something not unlike an old Sears catalogue guitar, but his heart was set, and his mother took the guitar out in credit, and just like that, Rory Gallagher had his guitar. So I want to outline a bit about the Fender Stratocaster, its origins, spec, and so on, because it has its own history worth discussing, and then we will circle back to Rory Strat, where it came from and how it changed over time with Rory, and most controversially, where it is today. I've notes here about the history of guitar. I'll not linger too long on them because I don't want to get kind of bogged down in that. But the term guitar, as I found, has been used for a range of chordophones or string instruments, as they're better known. The modern word guitar and its ancestors have been applied to a wide variety of chordophones since classical times, sometimes causing confusion. Several scholars cite varying influences as ancestors to the modern guitar, although the development of the earliest guitar is lost to the history of medieval Spain. 2 instruments are commonly claimed as influential predecessors, the 4-string oud and its precursor, the European lute. The former was brought to Iberia by the Moors in the 8th century. It has often been assumed that the guitar is a development of the lute or the ancient Greek kithara. At least 2 instruments called guitars were in use in Spain by 1200. The guitarra latina, Latin guitar, and the so-called guitarra morisca, the Moorish guitar. The guitarra morisca had a rounded back, a wide fingerboard, and several sound holes. The guitarra latina had a single sound hole and a narrower neck. By the 14th century, the qualifiers morisca, and latina had been dropped, and these 2 chordophones were simply referred to as guitars. There were many different plucked instruments used throughout the Middle Ages. Spanish vihuela, also known in Italy as the viola da mano, was a key precursor to the Baroque guitar, popular in the 15th and 16th centuries. It had 6 courses, a body similar to the guitar, and a tuning like a lute, although it shared features with viols and early guitars. It eventually evolved into a form more like the modern guitar. Its popularity in Spain and Italy was short-lived, and the last music published for it appeared in 1576. By the mid-16th century, the 5-course Baroque guitar emerged in Spain and became widely popular in Spain, Italy, and France through the mid-18th century. Unlike earlier guitars, it had tuning and string arrangements that were unique, sparking debate about its origins. The instrument is sometimes credited to Vicente Espinel, though this claim is contested. Despite the controversy, the 5-course guitar became influential and was adopted and adapted by other European countries, eventually earning the name Spanish guitar abroad. So by the mid-19th century, the modern classical and acoustic guitar had taken shape thanks to Antonio Torres Jurado, who increased the size of the guitar body, altered its proportions, and invented the breakthrough fan-braced pattern. Bracing, the internal pattern of the wood reinforcements used to secure the guitar's top and back and prevent the instrument from collapsing under tension. It's an important factor in how the guitar sounds. Torres' design greatly improved volume, tone, and projection of the instrument, and it has remained essentially unchanged since. So I guess to sort of summarize that, you could say it was kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Baroque guitar, something like think of it like a small guitar with fewer strings, smaller scale length, and a bit more of a boxed shape, and then by the mid-19th century, it basically looks kind of as it does now. You can think of a classical guitar, a Spanish guitar then by that point. But the shift in musical instrumentation from the 19th to the 20th century saw a move from a more traditional Romantic era orchestra toward a greater emphasis on experimentation and new sounds, including the introduction of electronic instruments. While the core instruments like the violin, flute, and horn remained largely unchanged, the 20th century witnessed the integration of instruments like the electric guitar, electric bass, and the theremin, along with the rise of synthesizers. The demand for volume in the concert halls pushed the industry, and it jumped ahead with its innovation seemingly non-stop from the turn of the century, and is arguably still doing so. I saw actually an amazing new instrument called the circle guitar. Confusing by its name, it's far more than just a guitar. The circle guitar is an innovative electric guitar invented by Anthony Dickens that features a motorized, programmable rotating wheel with picks to strum the strings, creating rhythms and textures that are difficult or impossible to achieve with a traditional guitar. It essentially kind of acts like a self-strumming guitar with a built-in step sequencer, but these cultural shifts in the early 20th century and global innovations directly impacted the musical instrument industry. So early 20th century, we're talking now electric instruments, electric guitars, basically is where we're at. Electric guitars were originally designed by acoustic guitar makers and instrument manufacturers. The demand for amplified guitars began during the big band era. As orchestras increased in size, guitar players soon realized that necessity in guitar amplification and electrification was necessary. The first electric guitars used in jazz were hollow archtop acoustic guitar bodies with electromagnetic transducers. The first commercially marketed electrically amplified stringed instrument was the frying pan, a cast aluminium lap steel guitar designed in 1931 by George Bucamp and Paul Barth. Bucamp with Adolf Rickenbacker also invented electromagnetic pickups, which converted string vibrations into electrical signals for amplification. Production began in 1932 under the Rowe-Pat-In Corporation, later renamed Rickenbacker Electro-Stringed Instrument Company in 1934. Although Bucamp's patent was granted in 1937, several companies had already begun producing electric guitars. By 1935, Rickenbacker released the Electro-Spanish Ken Roberts, the first full-scale 25-inch electric guitar playable while standing with a strap. It featured 17 accessible frets and was the first to include a hand-operated vibrato device called the Vibrola, invented by Doc Kaufman. Fewer than 50 of these groundbreaking guitars were made, and fewer than 10 are known to survive today. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize the Vibrola was so old, and I didn't realize the first electric guitar was in 1935. It's pretty cool. The Vibrola is kind of like, if you think of Rory's guitar, if you think of he took it off his Strat, but if you think of a Fender Stratocaster, it has that people call the whammy bar. It's like a tremolo arm basically, and there's loads of designs for this that we'll kind of talk about at some stage. The Vibrola arm is one version of it. There's the Bigsby, that's another type of this. The sideways Vibrola is kind of what I picture when I hear Vibrola, which I think, based on a little bit of research, that this Electro-Spanish Ken Roberts guitar had the sideways Vibrola, and then obviously like I said, the Strat had the kind of more traditional whammy bar approach. The first commercially available solid body electric Spanish guitar was produced by Rickenbacker in 1931. Other early solid body guitars followed, such as the Songster by Slingerland and a guitar reportedly built around 1940 by Jamaican inventor Hedley Jones. Guitarist Les Paul is often credited with inventing an early solid body guitar in the 1940s known as the Log, which was made from a 4x4 block of pine with attached pickups and metal brackets to rejoin the neck and body. While seeking a manufacturer for the log, he was repeatedly turned down. Meanwhile, Leo Fender was developing what would become the Fender Telecaster, released in 1950. Designed for mass production, the Telecaster featured a single cutaway ash body, a bolt-on maple neck, a slanted pickup mounted into a steel bridge plate with 3 adjustable saddles. Its blonde finish and practical design made it commercially viable. It is widely considered the world's first commercially marketed solid-body electric guitar. The Telecaster's success prompted Gibson to revisit Les Paul's design, leading to the release of the Les Paul model in 1952. And the Telecaster and the Les Paul both remain in production to this day. So we'll touch more on this on a dedicated post about guitar history, but it's a cool time period to consider that these two guitar icons were kind of racing to get the first commercially viable solid body guitar at this time. That could be a good movie. That'd be really cool. Okay, so it's worth quickly talking through the Fender Telecaster, because without it we don't get to the Fender Strat. So in 1950, Leo Fender introduced the world to the Fender Esquire, a single pickup, bolt-on neck, solid body guitar. Introduced in an initial small batch run of 50 guitars, priced at $139.95, which is equivalent to about $1,700 dollars in 2024. This first run had stability issues, however, due to the lack of a truss rod. The truss rod is essentially a component of a guitar or other stringed instruments that stabilizes the lengthwise forward curvature, also known as the relief of the neck, and it keeps the neck straight by countering the pull of the strings and the natural tendencies in the woods. So it's kind of like a key component to keep everything balanced and keep everything in the right tension. And later in 1950, this single pickup model was discontinued, and a 2 pickup model was renamed the Broadcaster. From this point onward, all Fender necks incorporated a truss rod, and the Esquire was reintroduced in 1951 as a single pickup variant at a lower price than that of the Broadcaster. And as alluded to in the previous episode, Rory had an Esquire. His Fender Esquire was heavily modded, as a lot of guitarists tended to do. But another key Esquire player, and possibly the most known Fender Esquire player, is Bruce Springsteen. However, in late 1951, Gretsch took legal action against Fender, as Broadcaster was already a product name coined and trademarked for a line of Gretsch drums. So Fender started to remove the Broadcaster print from their guitars, and this period, for about 9 months to a year, I think, it's a super rare and expensive run of guitars called the No-Caster. So it's basically a Telecaster shape or an Esquire shape or a Broadcaster shape, and it has no model branding on it, so it doesn't say Esquire, doesn't say Telecaster, doesn't say Broadcaster, it has nothing on it, and this is kind of called the No-Caster. And there's a few fantastic if you just search it up on YouTube, there's some brilliant videos of people playing a kind of super rare Fender No-Casters, and they're cool. It's just a cool kind of super specific period in that history, but it's a cool thing. And later on, Fender would actually trademark the term No-Caster, or the model No-Caster as well. And then by 1952, Leo Fender and his team had finalized the name for their solid body guitar, the Fender Telecaster. So we're on to the Strat now, and I would argue that this is the most iconic guitar ever. Like, when I picture a guitar, even before I was a guitar player and enthusiast and guitar nerd, I would just see a Fender Strat. It is so ingrained into the zeitgeist. It's crazy to think that it was once seen as an outlandish or different kind of strange guitar make. Leo Fender needed to compete with Gibson's hugely successful and high-end Les Paul model. The Fender website states, it's not like Leo Fender was trying to be radical and revolutionary. A practical person, he just wanted to build a better guitar. He and his closest staff spent long hours developing and perfecting the new model, which quickly shaped up to be its own instrument rather than being an improved version of the Telecaster. So this new guitar certainly owed several design elements to its predecessor, and as late as early 1953, its body shape closely resembled that of the Telecaster. In spring of that year, new arrival to the Fender team, Freddie Tavares, sketched out a new body type shape that sleekly adapted Leo Fender's balanced 2-horn shape for the precision bass, and the new guitar thus combined features of Fender's first 2 instruments of the 1950s. And another important development in early 1953, Fender sales chief Don Randall came up with a name for it, which is the Fender Stratocaster. So that's pretty cool. I had no idea the Fender P bass was that old, and I had no idea that it actually kind of inspired the Strat shape. I would have thought it was the other way around. I would have just assumed the Strat was the sort of the mold and everything had to follow that. But again, the Telecaster came first, and then trying to improve upon the Telecaster to meet the commercial and high-end viability and success of the Les Paul. They ended up sort of mixing the Telecaster and the P bass and getting that, iconic and, in my opinion, kind of perfect guitar shape, which is the Strat shape. It was cool, really, really, really cool thing to note. So it's a double cutaway body, and this kind of allows for easier access to the upper frets, while the ergonomic shape provides enhanced balance and reduced weight. The Strat's innovative 3 pickup configuration offered a greater tonal palette than most other guitars on the market at the time, providing players with the ability to blend various pickup combinations for a diverse range of sounds. So it's interesting to note here, from 1954 to 1977, Fender Strats were made and produced with a 3-way pickup selector. So you had the bridge pickup, the middle pickup, and then the neck pickups. That's, you look at a Fender Strat, there's 3 pickups below the strings at the bridge there. And then from 1977 onwards, they have been updated to utilize a 5-way pickup selector. Basically, guitarists from as early as the mid-1960s would use tape or matchsticks to prop the pickup selector in what are now known as the 2nd and 4th positions. So these are those kind of midpoints that went from the 3 to the 5, selector model. And the midpoints between the two, the pickups, they allow this kind of blended or out of phase sound that people often call glassy. And if you want some key examples of these sounds, Jimi Hendrix was a huge name in the development of the 5-way switch. He favoured that 4th position, which is the neck and the middle pickups blended together. John Mayer is also a fan of this position as well. Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits used the 2nd position, which is the blend of the bridge and the middle pickup. He used this on the iconic Sultans of Swing. So, if you want to hear just those two pickups, a great way to listen to the two differences in that, I would say, is if you listen to Dire Straits' Sultans of Swing and listen to John Mayer's Gravity, and you can hear the difference in those two pickup positions, and you can hear that kind of glassy crispness that I think people are talking about. And another great example of this tone, the 2nd position, so the bridge and middle pickup variation, is U2's The Edge. Almost all of the guitar on their album The Joshua Tree was done using this position, and his signature dotted eighth delay with this, it kind of emphasizes that real glassy, crisp kind of bite that he gets through that playing style. And again, these iconic guitar players and their iconic sounds were only made achievable by the accidental or possibly forced discovery of these two positions, the 2nd and the 4th positions. So you can see why Fender then would take that and incorporate that into the Fender Stratocaster model. A fun little story actually about these pickup positions is that in 2021, when John Mayer first released his track Last Train Home, it had this kind of warm and bright guitar tone, which, when you listen to it, knowing these sounds, your mind automatically says, right, well, that's the 4th position. But then in the music video for the track, what I'm led to believe since this has all come out is that this was kind of like a prank against the guitar community. And John Mayer's PRS Silver Sky, which is worth saying is like a Fender copy basically. It's an S style guitar made by PRS. It's a Strat, but it's not made by Fender basically. And he had that the PRS guitar or the Silver Sky guitar in position 2. So even though you're kind of John Mayer's playing style is always position 4, and the sound when you hear it is position 4, but then when you're watching the video, he was in position 2, and I think that was just kind of like some kind of prank against the online guitar community. And another key innovation on this guitar, on the Fender Strat that is, was the spring tension vibrato system. The vibrato system, often called the tremolo or whammy bar, which we touched on earlier, on a Fender Stratocaster, allows players to temporarily change the pitch of strings, creating effects like vibrato, pitch bends, and even dive bombs. It does this by altering the tension of the strings, typically by using a lever to pull up or down on the bridge, which in turn affects the string's pitch. And if you want the most kind of extreme example of this innovation and this effect, basically, is if you listen to Eruption by Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen's kind of, albeit his tremolo system was a lot more robust and refined when he used it in this track, when you compare it to what I'm talking about, the 1954 Fender Strat version. But without this inclusion on that original Fender Strat, the kind of signature stylings of Eddie Van Halen would have never had the opportunity to come around. And the spring-based system far surpassed the capabilities of the Bigsby, which was the tremolo system introduced in 1951, and has become a beloved feature on guitars. Like I love a Bigsby on a Gibson Les Paul, and there's countless videos of people using a Bigsby for the kind of dive bomb effect that the spring tension system is capable of. But I'd say The spring tension system helped kind of shape that genre of music in an invaluable way. So enough about the history of the Fender Stratocaster and the history of guitars. We're going to finally talk about what we want to talk about, which is the Rory Gallagher Fender Stratocaster. I'd probably said at the start of the episode, but there is a beeping going on behind me during the entire recording of this. I think the smoke alarm might need new batteries, but we move on. So it's a nice background noise anyway. So Rory's Fender Strat was a 1961 Fender Stratocaster, and the Strat was so new and otherworldly that few could see themselves playing it, or straying far from the archtops or hollow bodies of the time, until in 1957 Buddy Holly and the Crickets released their debut album, The Chirping Crickets, which featured Buddy Holly holding a Fender Stratocaster. Buddy Holly got his first Strat in 1955 at Adair Music in his hometown of Lubbock, Texas, after his older brother Larry loaned him the money. At the time, Strats were more popular with country musicians, which may have been part of what attracted Holly to the guitar, as his fingerpicking and twangy lead style owed a debt to his kind of country and western musical roots. This was a huge win for Fender. Almost every rock musician that came to prominence in the 60s would go on to cite Buddy Holly. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Hank Marvin and Rory Gallagher alike have all noted this album and this image of Buddy Holly holding the Fender Stratocaster is kind of what inspired them to want and go for the Fender Strat as their guitar. Buddy Holly was one of Gallagher's influences, so it's no surprise that this impacted Rory Gallagher's guitar aspirations. And the story of how Rory came to own his 1961 Fender Stratocaster is somewhat interesting in itself. So the guitar's previous owner was Jim Conlon, who is known for being the founder and guitarist of an Irish show band called the Royal Show Band. We talk a lot about the show bands in the first or the second episode of the show, so if you want to go back and refresh yourself on what the show bands are, that might be a good one to go back and listen to. But Jim allegedly ordered a red Stratocaster from the US, but this Sunburst came instead, so he had to use the guitar for around half a year until the red one would arrive. After the red Strat finally got to Ireland, the Sunburst one was put on sale at Michael Crowley's music store in Cork. There are stories to say that this was the first Stratocaster to be imported into Ireland, and I can't confirm this, but it is part of the lore and mythology of Rory, so we can run with that for now. Rory recalls, it's a 1961 Fender Stratocaster which I bought second-hand in 1963. The previous owner was a guy in a show band. He originally ordered a red one so he could look just like Hank Marvin in the shadows, but in those days Fenders only came into the country in ones and twos, so he had to make do with the Sunburst instead. I was still at school when I saw it in the shop window for £100 with an old brown case thrown in, so I saved up enough to pay the deposit and bought it on hire purchase. So that's the credit agreement that we talked about previously for the guitar that Rory and his mum had set up. So Michael Crowley had promised Rory's mother that he would let her know if he ever got a second-hand Strat in, and when the guitar arrived, Michael ran to Rory's mother to inform her of this, and when Rory got to the store and held the guitar, he knew it was the one, and Michael agreed to sell it to Rory and his mother. So this Strat became key to Rory's sound. If you've listened to any of his recordings or watched him live, you can hear how warm and muddy it could sound. It was dated in 1961, November 1961, and this year, right in the middle of this kind of year is right in the middle of what you would call the kind of golden era of Strats. From 1957 to 63, people say that the Strats had their peak. In terms of vintage guitars anyways, the kind of more modern, super spec'd and I suppose clean and refined ones are, probably arguably just as good, but the pickups were improved and they were hotter and more and had more range than the ones that preceded it and the ones that succeeded it in the late 60s, 70s. And this was before the mass-produced CBS era of Fender began. Other notable players with Strats from this era, just to sort of kind of give you an idea of who else was playing this kind of golden era Strat. John Frusciante plays an iconic 1962 Fender Strat, and a more unconventional approach was Eric Clapton. So fresh out of the 60s, he ditched Gibsons. So after Cream broke up, he just got rid of his want for Gibsons and bought 5 or 6 Strats dated from 1954 onwards. And using these guitars, he assembled the guitar that would be known as Blackie, and it's kind of his signature Strat guitar, and it would go on to be his signature guitar. And you can buy, copies of it in the same way you can buy a copy of the Rory Gallagher Strat. So let's talk about some technical specs of Rory's Strat. So Rory recalls, I sweat a lot when I play, and over the years the body absorbed a lot of moisture, the body of the guitar he's talking about. I've often thought that it's come to the end of its life. Recently, 2 pickups packed up together, they just cut out when I was playing. I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to get new pickups to sound the same, but fortunately they matched perfectly. It would go on that he would swap his pickups kind of quite often. I personally love the middle pickup on a Strat, and it's so underused. Like if I'm playing my Strat and I want to play, Clapton or even Dire Straits, I would go for the middle pickup over anything else. I'd even play Black Sabbath. Kind of sounds pretty cool on it as well. I kind of went through a Black Sabbath phase when I was kind of learning guitar, and there's like a warmness and a muddiness that the middle pickup has, but it also has that the kind of brightness of the bridge pickup, to an extent. It's the closest thing maybe to a humbucker on the standard Strat is that middle position. But anyway, so back to the pickups. In interviews, Rory unfortunately never specified the exact model of pickups he used to replace the originals. However, it's likely that he opted for stock Fender pickups from around the same era. An interesting detail is that starting around 1975, the bridge pickup cover appeared to be brand new, like bright white, while the neck and middle covers had kind of that yellow aged colour. So this suggests that for some reason only the bridge pickup received a new cover, despite both the bridge and neck pickups reportedly failing at the same time. This configuration, based on photographic evidence, remained unchanged until roughly July 1982. It's possible the pickups were rewound or swapped without documentation, but visually they appeared consistent until then. In July 1982, the bridge pickup was replaced yet again, this time with one featuring a black plastic cover. A photo taken at the Hot Press Music Festival in Punchestown Racecourse, Kildare, on July 18th, 1982, clearly shows the updated pickup. The same setup is visible in footage from the Rockpalast performance in Loreley, Germany, on August 28th, 1982. So this new pickup may have been the same model used in the Fender Lead Series guitar, which was produced between 1971 and I think 1981 or 2. And this theory is supported by a comment from Rory mentioning a Fender Hot X100 installed in the bridge, though no such model officially exists. It's likely he was referring to the Lead 2 X1 pickup, which commonly came with the black covers, as we're seeing in these images of Rory at the time with the Strat and the black covers on the bridge pickup. Another possibility is that the black pickup came directly from Rory's 1979 anniversary Stratocaster, which featured black pickup covers. Alternatively, it might have been an entirely different pickup altogether. From this point forward, the history of Rory's pickups becomes increasingly speculative. So basically, just to kind of summarize, from 1970, let's say, onwards, Rory was playing about with the pickups and the guitar. The bridge and the neck were replaced a few times. The bridge seems to be swapped out quite a lot. And like I said, by the end of the 70s and early 80s, we don't really know what actually is in that bridge position. But from this point forward, like I said, it becomes much more speculative. By early 1984, the black bridge pickup had disappeared, as seen in footage from the Ulster Hall in Belfast on January 4th of that year. Whether the pickup was replaced entirely or simply had its cover changed remains unclear. Over the years, Rory frequently mentioned modifying his pickups, but it wasn't until much later that anyone got a clear view of what was actually inside his Stratocaster. So in the early mid-2000s, Kent Armstrong was approached by Rory Gallagher's brother Donal and nephew Daniel to help recreate the pickups from Rory's iconic 1961 Fender Stratocaster. Upon examining the guitar, Kent determined that two of the pickups were Fender stock models, while the third was a DiMarzio Fat Strat. This discovery suggests that by then, Rory's 1961 Strat was equipped with pickups from the 1970s. However, there's an important detail worth noticing. The bridge pickup might have actually been a Fender X1. Rory had previously expressed preference for the X1 over the DiMarzio FS1, and when inspecting the bridge pickup, a yellow wire can be seen soldered to it. To the best of our knowledge, DiMarzio FS1 pickups never use yellow wires, whereas Fender's X1 pickups, that model did use the yellow wires. So if this identification is accurate, it suggests that Rory, although saying that he tried the FS1, eventually returned to a Fender pickup at some point between 1984 and 1996. 1995 when he passed away. He may have changed his mind again, possibly favouring the FS1, or at least moving away from strictly using Fender pickups. As for the neck and middle pickups, Kent dated them to the period when Rory's original pickups failed, so around 1975. This makes it plausible that Rory had kept these replacements in place ever since. However, it's equally possible the pickups were swapped out multiple times over the years. Rory himself noted that all the pickups have been rewound at some stage, meaning that even if they were original Fender units, their tone had likely been altered over time. The rewinding is just kind of recoiling that the solenoid, the wire, that kind of gives it the magnetic feel and gives it that, induces that magnetic current that allows the strings to pass in and out and create the amplified sound. So the neck pickup in particular appears to have a plastic bobbin with visible screw holes. Characteristics typically seen in pickups from 1970 reissue Stratocasters, both from the American Vintage and Mexican Made Classic series. And if you happen to have any more information on this type of pickup, feel free to share it in the comments. I'd never really heard much about that particular neck pickup. But as for the middle pickup, it's interesting to note that although the original 1961 middle unit was still functional when the other two failed in the 1970s, Rory eventually replaced it as well. This may have been due to the eventual failure or simply a desire to further tweak his tone. The pickup seen in the photographs of Rory Strat appear to be a standard grey bottom Fender single coil pickup from the 1970s. So also all this information that I'm talking about, all these these changes that have been kind of noted and cited throughout the years, I'll link all the links. I'll link all my citations. It's always going to be there for everybody. Just for peace of mind, if you're hearing me throw all these things out and wondering where that's come from, it's all going to be there. You can check it yourself, fact check it yourself, and have a read through. So the standard 3-way pickup selector of the 1961 Fender Strat, the switch was replaced with a more modern 5-way switch, and the controls were rewired for a master volume and master tone with the middle tone pot disconnected. That's interesting. So he had it rewired, so he just had one volume, one tone basically. That's kind of a very simple kind of straightforward rock tone that he kind of was after with that mod. To me, that reminds me of kind of guys like Malcolm Young, who his Gretsch guitar only had volume and tone, and that's it. And if you could even go further than that, there's guys who just have like Eddie Van Halen. He only would have just volume on the guitar at most times. But that's pretty cool. Additional modifications to Rory Stratocaster include the pickguard, which was replaced in the mid to late 1960s with an identical one after the original one became warped, reportedly due to heat exposure during early gigs with Taste. The original tuning machines were also changed, replaced with a mix of 5 Spertzel tuners and 1 Goto. To improve tuning stability, especially since Rory rarely used the tremolo system was blocked and from the back using a small wooden wedge. So this basically made it a hardtail Strat, and the bridge was also reportedly swapped for a brass replacement made by Star Guitars. The exact timing of these changes kind of remain unclear. But so basically what he's done there is he's cut off that whammy bar performance on the guitar. So the whammy bar, he never used it. So he blocked off the spring cavity in the back of the guitar, which allowed the bridge to move and create that effect. Then he swapped the bridge for one that didn't even have the whammy bar on it, just a more hardtail Strat bridge. So in the late 70s, Rory Gallagher removed the original neck from the 1961 Stratocaster because it had absorbed so much sweat and moisture from constant gigging that it began affecting playability, essentially. He hung the neck to dry in a warm room and eventually reinstalled it, although Rory later claimed in a 1984 interview that the neck had been off for only a few months, about a decade earlier. Photographic evidence suggests the neck was actually off the guitar from late 1979 until at least 1982, and it was replaced by a newer neck with a veneer fretboard for this time. The timeline discrepancy has led to several theories. One possibility is that Rory remembered the event incorrectly and was referring to the 1979 to 1982 period. Another theory is that he removed the original neck on more than one occasion over the years to let it dry out. And this would align possibly with other interviews where Rory had mentioned regularly swapping necks between gigs due to moisture issues. However, Rory's family only recalls a single spare neck being used, one that was eventually given away, making the theory of multiple neck swaps harder to confirm. It's kind of crazy that he was so sweaty that the guitar neck was absorbing so much sweat that he had to take it off to dry. I've never heard that before in all my years looking at guitars and researching musicians like this. It's kind of gross, I'll not lie. The original neck underwent several modifications over time. Rory replaced the nut, refretted the neck multiple times using standard Fender fret wire, and he added a second string tree to the headstock, which is unusual for a 1961 Strat. He also changed the original tuners. We talked about that already. And the mismatched tuner setup remained on the guitar for the rest of his career and was faithfully reproduced on the Fender Rory Gallagher signature model. So Rory believed the neck played a crucial role in the guitar's tone. He often stated that a good neck could make even a mediocre body sound great, while a bad neck could ruin the tone of an otherwise excellent guitar. So his kind of meticulous care and modifications throughout his entire, 30, let's say 35, 30 years, maybe near 40 years with that guitar, I think reflect just how much he valued its contribution to his sound. So, him and the fans alike both, I suppose, put this guitar on such a high pedestal, and if you ever read any interviews, which we'll link below and we'll link in the descriptions, he speaks so highly of this guitar, and you get the impression that although Rory had many guitars, this is the guitar, and if he had to just pick one guitar, he would just pick this guitar, and that would be it. So I would really suggest that you check out the links for this episode if you want to dig deeper. I've tried my best to sort of run through everything and summarize it and kind of, give as much detail as kind of due, but also to kind of, not get too bogged down talking about, pickup wiring and things like that maybe aren't going to be the most interesting thing to listen to. But again, if you want to read all this and learn more about this, all the links will be there. But the next thing that I want to talk about is where the guitar has been and its time since Rory passed away. So one of my all-time favourite videos of this guitar since Rory's passing is when Johnny Marr played it. So Johnny Marr is one of my all-time favourite guitar players, songwriters and musicians. He's just incredible. And he has such a love of Rory Gallagher. There's a brilliant video of Johnny Marr playing the 1961 Strat, and it's great. He runs through some kind of Gallagher riffs, Gallagher-style licks, but also shows his own style on the instrument. He launches into the kind of shadow play riff, and I almost kind of just want to hear Morrissey start to sing it as if it was a Smith song, on Strange Ways Here We Come, or on The Queen Is Dead. It wouldn't be out of place, that riff, that styling. He doesn't say a word in the whole video, other than a brief apology for playing one of the riffs wrong, but it's great. The guitar sounds amazing, and it looks comfortable to play, and the pickups sound like they're just like ready to explode. Another great example of this guitar being played recently is Carlos O'Connell from Fontaine's TC playing it, along with a few other pieces from Rory's collection. This was kind of around the time that the auction was happening, and this video is on YouTube again if you want to look at it. The magazine and publication of the same name, Guitarist, it's all there. It's on their YouTube channel, but it's amazing. Again, he plays his own style. He doesn't actually play any Rory riffs in the whole video, but he plays his own riffs on it, the Fontaine's kind of riffs. And I mean, they're one of the biggest Irish bands in the world right now, and one of the biggest bands in the world right now, and they're Irish, and so that kind of, you can't help imagine that Rory would be proud of another Irish artist taking the global limelight, especially for guitar music. For the last number of years, Carlos has toured with a Rory replica Strat, which he talks about at length in a linked rig rundown video by Premier Guitar. So watch that if you want to hear him kind of talk about playing the Rory kind of replica model and his sort of experience touring with that and writing with that and working with that. But it's brilliant. It's really cool he uses that guitar. I think that's a real kind of Irish pride there. He's one of the biggest Irish guitarists in the world right now, playing arguably the biggest, the most iconic guitar by the most iconic Irish guitar player. It's just a great homage and definitely worth checking out. And another guy that played it is Joe Bonamassa. And a lot of people will say that he is the best modern blues player. He's a guitar enthusiast and he's a guitar nerd of the highest order. And all those are amazing qualities. There's nothing wrong with that. What I like about Bonamassa is he kind of gets old guitars and he uses them. So, he has like such a mad collection of vintage and old guitars, but he does use them, and I think that's kind of really important. And on numerous occasions, he has in fact used the Rory Gallagher Strat, the 1961 Strat that we're talking about. Joe Bonamassa had this to say regarding his sold out shows in London way back in 2011. So he says, "To sell out London's Hammersmith Apollo was amazing," says Joe Bonamassa. "Selling it out for 2 nights, even better. But to get to play Rory Gallagher's 1961 Stratocaster on my opening date, that's something I would have paid money for. Talk about a once-in-a-lifetime experience." So Bonamassa described the moment as surreal, emphasising the profound connection he felt upon holding the instrument. He noted that while the guitar was exceptional in its own right, its association with Gallagher imbued it with a unique aura. The wear and modifications on the Stratocaster told the story of Gallagher's intense playing style and dedication. So that's like a really interesting note, that he was able to play this guitar, and while it is just a guitar and the guitar is exceptional, it's that the story of the guitar and it being Rory Gallagher's guitar kind of gives it a whole other kind of surreal quality that you can't maybe really pinpoint to physical features, but when you pick it up and that it is in fact the guitar that Rory Gallagher was shredding on for all those years, then there is that definite feel, especially for somebody like Bonamassa and even like Johnny Marr and Carlos O'Connell, who are all big kind of Rory Gallagher fans. During the concert, Bonamassa used the Stratocaster for 3 songs, his first 3 songs, including Gallagher's Cradle Rock, his own song When the Fire Hits the Sea, and a rendition of Gary Moore's Midnight Blues. He expressed a desire to play the guitar throughout the entire set, but switched to a Les Paul for the remaining songs. The evening was further highlighted by a guest appearance from Bernie Marsden, who brought his 1959 Les Paul, creating a memorable moment for the guitar enthusiasts. So reflecting more on the experience, Bonamassa conveyed Deep respect for Gallagher's legacy, acknowledging the Stratocaster as more than just an instrument. It was a testament to Gallagher's influence and passion for music. And it's safe to say that he's probably going to use that guitar this summer to play the tribute gigs. I would bet. And better than that, he owns the Rangemaster that Rory used to use, which is basically like a high-end boost kind of pedal, essentially, that Rory would kind of use on the way into his Vox to kind of give it that extra bite. But I would 100% say that for these June gigs of Bonamassa Pen tribute to Gallagher, he will end up using the 1961 Strat, undoubtedly. So it's a dream of mine to own a replica of this Strat. I love it. I love how it looks. I love how it sounds. I don't have a huge interest in old vintage guitars just yet, but I'd be lying if I said I don't look at them. My goal in life with my own guitars is to have them kind of wear down over time. I have an American Standard Strat that I got as a gift from my dad, and it's probably my favorite guitar my favorite thing that I own. You know, the eternally discussed burning building question, or its variant, you know, the house is on fire, what do you pick? I'm certain that my answer to both is my Strat. I love how it feels, I love how it sounds, I love how it looks. It's about 13 years with me now, and I actually don't know kind of what year it was itself, and I'll search it up and find out the answer, and I'll maybe post this in an intro or outro of this episode, or just post it on the social medias. But it's gone from this kind of really clean white to a very yellow and kind of darker shade of white, and it's accentuated more at the position that it sits in contact with my body. So I love it. Like it's just my favorite guitar. But I would love a Rory replica. You know, it's kind of a dream of mine to have one, and one day I hope I can get one. I played one in London one time, and it was just incredible. Like the pickups were just, they were so hot, they were just about to explode. Like it's insane. But of all the signature Strats you can buy, that is my dream one. I also do love the Ed O'Brien Strat, though. It's pretty cool too. Ed O'Brien, obviously famously from Radiohead. So the Rory website details how the replica came about, and I'm going to read out this excerpt of it, and then we'll talk through that. So the website states that Fender custom shop designers met Donald Gallagher, brother of the late guitarist Rory Gallagher, in Los Angeles in 1997 and received one of the most coveted guitars of all time, Gallagher's heavily worn 1961 Stratocaster guitar. Fender initially built 40 replicas for European sale, but was subsequently besieged with requests for more. The Rory Gallagher Tribute Stratocaster guitar is an exact replica of that revered instrument, down to the extremely worn three-colour sunburst alder body, maple neck and rosewood fingerboard. It even has 5 Spersal tuners and 1 Goto tuner, and the 12th fret dot marker is a white plastic rather than the original clay. It also features 3 custom wound 60s single coil pickups, aged chrome hardware, 21 medium jumbo frets, and a synthetic bone nut. Our homage to a true and truly missed master. So that's what the website has to say about it. So basically, in this 1997 run, only 40 guitars were made, and these are like high-end master-built Strats for European sale. And it's an exact replica of that, the 1961 Strat. It even had the kind of tuning configuration that he had, the tuning peg configuration he had set up on it. And what I actually was wondering is, I wonder if anybody who actually got one of these Strats played about with the pickup swaps that Rory had done throughout his years. You know, maybe they took them out and stuck in kind of other pickups that Rory had over the time to see if they could, get certain tones from certain eras. But the guitar build was done by John Cruz, who in 2004 oversaw a further run of this guitar. This time it was labelled the Artist Model. And then again, in 2010, it was launched again as the Rory Gallagher Signature Strat, and is now produced by the Custom Shop. So I would take any of these runs, to be honest. I'm sure there's information about what makes each of them different. You know, maybe it's different pickups, maybe it's just kind of slight spec differences. Maybe the master-built ones, the original 40 run is the most accurate, and the rest ones are sort of maybe, but who knows? Like I'm not sure. But like I said, I would take any of these. So if Donald Gallagher wants to give me a copy of Rory Gallagher Strat, please do. We're kind of getting on a bit with this, but I'll wrap it up here now, and we're just going to talk about where the Strat is today. You know, where has it been, and when it wasn't being let out to the guitarist that I mentioned, it was under Donald's guard along with all of the Rory Gallagher collection. And in 2024, Donald announced his plan to auction the collection along with the 1961 Strat. I know this is a huge topic, and I'll try and break it down a little bit. But in July 2024, Donald Gallagher announced the auction of close to 100 of Rory's collection, instruments, guitars, amps, whatever, all these different things. And quick off the bat, the topic obviously went to the iconic Strat. The guitar was not only synonymous with the guitarist, but a symbol for Ireland. One of the most revered guitarists, praised and hailed. This guitar stands shoulder to shoulder with the iconic signatures of Eddie Van Halen, Brian May, Slash, and many, many more. So naturally, the master mold for this guitar, Rory's 1961 Strat, was wanted back in Ireland. This was certain that the Irish people and the Rory Gallagher community wanted it back in Ireland and would no sooner see it in some millionaire's house, sealed in a glass case. The fetching price for this guitar was a staggering £1 million. And in October, the guitar was bought and sent home. Donald had this to say about the auction. We have been overwhelmed by the response to this auction and the outpouring love and respect shown towards Rory and his incredible legacy. Rory meant so much to so many people, and we want to thank everyone who took part in the auction and everyone who shared their own memories of Rory with us. It has been nearly 30 years since my brother's passing, and though it was a difficult decision to part with this collection, I am grateful that these treasured instruments can now tour the globe as Rory did, spreading his music and memory. We were also delighted that Rory's 1961 Strat will be returning to Ireland, where it can be shared with his fans for generations to come. We would like to thank Bonhams for their amazing work and support in this auction. One thing is for sure, if Bonhams is a record company, we would want Rory to sign with them. So Rory's 1961 Stratocaster, which he purchased second hand for £100 in 1963, was sold at a London auction for £700,000, approximately €841,000, with the final price reaching about €1.7 million after premiums. The guitar, central to Gallagher's career and one of the most recognisable in rock history, was acquired by Live Nation Gaiety Ltd. and will be donated to the National Museum of Ireland under a cultural heritage scheme. This ensures the instrument remains in Ireland and accessible to the public. Minister for Arts Catherine Martin expressed delight at the guitar's return, emphasising its cultural significance. And I agree, I think that this guitar culturally belongs to and in Ireland, and I'm finding myself more and more patriotic of Rory as I dive into this legacy and the story. But I'll quickly share my own thoughts on the guitar and on kind of guitars in general. So look, I fully agree that the guitar belongs in Ireland, and I fully support and agree with the cultural ownership to Ireland, and I can empathise with the desire to have it on display here. And I do ultimately see this as just a guitar. And while it is a symbol of Rory, and in many ways his only physical form here on the world, I'd hate to see the guitar not be used. I have no issue seeing Joe Bonamassa take it up this summer. I think a guitar like this, and all guitars, need to be played. And the thing that made this guitar special, and that made it sound how it did, wasn't all the mods we talked about. It wasn't the pickups, it wasn't the tuners, none of that made it sound as it did. It was Rory Gallagher that made it sound as it did. You know, if you handed him a guitar that was worth pale in comparison to this, he'd still make it sound like him. So the symbolic return is welcome, and I will hopefully see it, but I hope the importance is noted that the talent like his is what makes this what it is, a talent that should be nurtured. So the money, some money should be invested into local communities, in the arts in the country, to ensure that the next big thing has the facilities to become what they can. You know, support the infrastructure that can allow aspiring musicians to learn their craft. But anyway, I'll pin it there for now. That's the story of Rory Strat and the story of kind of Strats and we covered a lot of things. But as always, reach out if I've missed anything, if I wasn't clear on anything. All the links will be below. You can do your own reading in your own time. And join us in the next episode where we talk about the rest of Rory Gallagher's guitars and gear. Thank you very much.